All right, this is the Intro to Trigonometry series, and this is the first video in the series. And in this video, we're going over sine, cosine, and tangent trigonomic identities. So the sine identity, cosine identity, and tangent identity all have to do with right triangles. And they all have a signal of which one you're going to use of them. You're going to always use one of the three. So the sine signal is SOH. SOH. Cosine signal is CAH, CAH, and the tangent signal is TOA, TOA. So what, again, that might not make sense quite yet, but just keep watching and it will all make sense. So you're going to have a signal which leads to your trig function, which leads to your side ratio. So the signal, SOH, the signal is the S on the end, which tells you you're going to use the sine function, so the sine of the angle, which is going to lead to the side ratio. And for sine, the side ratio is the opposite side over the hypotenuse side. The signal for cosine is CAH, and again, the C tells you that it's cosine. So we have the cosine of the angle over, and the side ratio is the adjacent side over the hypotenuse side. And so again, notice C means cosine, A is adjacent, and H is hypotenuse. So think, that's what the signal shows. So S is sine, O is opposite side, H is hypotenuse. And then the last one is TOA. So T means you're going to use the tangent function. And then the O means you're going to have the opposite side over the adjacent side, A, TOA. So see how all signals, all three letters represent, the first letter represents the function, the second letter represents the top side of the fraction, and the third letter represents the bottom of the fraction. So the number one error when solving trig functions is labeling sides of a triangle. If you mislabel the sides, you're going to screw up your entire triangle. So the steps to labeling. First thing you're going to do when labeling on a right triangle is label the angle of focus, which will represent by F. Second is you're going to label the hypotenuse, which will represent by H. Third, you're going to label the opposite side, which is represented by O. And then fourth is you're going to label the adjacent side, represented by A. So let's go over these four just quickly, and so you have a good idea of what it means. So if you have a right triangle here, the angle of focus is represented by F. It can be a variable or a number. So see, F, it can be X, and it's always in degrees, or it can be 30 degrees, and it can be the top or the bottom angle. So see right here, it's the bottom, but it can also be the top. The hypotenuse is across from the right triangle, or the right angle of the triangle. So see that right angle, the squared angle is down there. So the hypotenuse is always across from that, and is also the longest side of the triangle. The opposite side is the other far side, or the opposite side of the angle of focus. So if the angle of focus is there, it's on the other side, and that's going to be O. So if we move the angle of focus down here, opposite side is going to be over there. So that's O. And then the adjacent side is the last side, and that's just the side right next to the angle of focus. So if the angle of focus right there, O is going to be on the opposite, and A is just going to be right next door. So if we move the angle of focus down here, A is going to be right down there, right next door. So let's take a triangle and let's label our sides and angles. So first, we're going to label the angle of focus. Second, we're going to label the hypotenuse, again, across from the 90-degree angle. Then we're going to label O. So first, you got to find the angle of focus, and then O is opposite the angle of focus, and then A right next door to the angle of focus. Let's move the angle of focus up here. and let's label with some actual numbers. First, we're going to label the angle of focus. And that theta symbol, just think of that as a variable. It's a variable of an angle. So just think of that as like x. So theta is going to be our angle of focus. Hypotenuse is across from the 90 degrees, so that's h. O is opposite the angle of focus, so the angle of focus is there, so it's going to be opposite or the other side of that. And then A is right next door. So again, that's how you label your 4 sides. You got to label the 3 sides in one angle. Follow that same formula every time, because again, the biggest screw up in solving trig functions is mislabeling your sides, which then gives you the wrong ratio, and it screws everything up. So make sure you label the sides right. The next video, we're going to look up how to set up functions and how to plug in.